welcome back inside the CKDJ studios right here for Wrestling with Ideas on CKDJ 107.9, Ottawa's new music. As you guys know, I am the music man Colin Scully, and I've got a very special guest co-host with me this week, TSN 1200 Lee Versage. Lee, how's it going today?
CKDJ, I have heard so much about, and finally to be in the lavish studios of CKDJ.
Yeah, man.
I'm excited.
So many of your the guys that you know have come through here, eh?
Yes.
Yeah, Scott MacArthur came through here.
Had my first radio show ever with Scott MacArthur.
Yeah.
It was called In the Zone. It was a nighttime show back in the early 2000s.
Back when Bell didn't own TSN 1200, back when it was the team.
That's right.
1200.
And Chum owned it. But Scott MacArthur, one of the great guys in radio, and I'm so happy he's doing well in Toronto now.
Yeah.
But we miss him here, and we used to go out at night to rinks and watch minor hockey games and interview kids, and that was our difference maker part of our show. And
Really?
we thought that was the coolest thing ever until we heard it back and thought it's really cool for the kids and nobody else. But but we had a great time, and he's just one of a ton of people that have come through and done a great job. So I'm lucky to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Back when I had my own show, back when I was co-hosting this show, I had my little own show called the Parts Unknown WrestleCast, actually, and he actually came on. Scott did, and we talked a little bit of we talked some baseball.
Yeah.
On the wrestling show, we talked some baseball, and then we got into a little bit of wrestling talk as well. He went to talk about how much he doesn't really watch how much he doesn't really watch the modern stuff because it's not as good as the old stuff. But a little known fact about you, Lee, you're actually a really big wrestling fan.
I'm a nerd. I'm a geek. And you know what? I don't care because I'm even going to do this live for you. This is how much of a fan I am. You haven't seen you haven't seen my T-shirt yet.
Oh no, he's got a Brian Pillman T-shirt on. That
I
is
have a
sick.
Brian effing Pillman shirt from ECW when he was in ECW.
Okay.
When he was called the Rogue Horseman. And he would come in, and it was a big angle. He was supposed to go back to WCW. But I thought you'd be impressed with this.
That's awesome, man.
Colin, because this is how big of a wrestling fan I am. When people say that, oh, I was a wrestling fan when I was young, and then I turned 14 and I grew up, I never did. And I'm excited about it. I still think all the time when people say, oh, don't you know it's fake? I'm like, really? Oh, my God, I've only watched it for 30 years. I never knew that. And then I ask them if they watch movies and TV shows and everything else and realize
Don't
that
you know those are fake?
even reality television shows are fake. And so, yes, I enjoy the entertainment of it. I love the storylines. And most importantly, and not to get too serious with you too quickly because we're going to talk some fun, I know. But being in radio, people have personalities in different ways that they come across on the radio, and maybe their personality is a little bit different from who they are in real life. Mm-hmm. I find wrestling fascinating because you have to be great in the ring, but if you're just great in the ring and you can't talk, you're not going to make it unless you're Goldberg. And then if you're a great talker, but you can't do anything in the ring, it's going to be hard to be a true superstar for a long time. And the way that these guys go about putting it all together, because it's their entire career, and some of them only get one shot. If you're really good, you get a couple of shots and maybe they transform you. But you get one shot, and you have to have all of this come together, and it's their livelihood. Yeah. And I find it interesting how they go about it to try and differentiate their characters, because if they don't make it, sometimes you only get one shot at being in the WWE. So I find it all fascinating.
Right. Now, before we get into sort of, because you said back when I had first messaged you that you're mainly an Attitude Era guy, so we're going to be talking a lot of Attitude Era stuff today.
Yeah.
But before we get into
I still watch, though.
Yeah.
I still watch.
As do I. Yeah.
You know what? This will kill you. I'm going to tell you a story about what happened to me 2-3 months ago, maybe a little bit more.
Right.
The consultant for Impact Wrestling, when they were here, they had their pay-per-view here and their tapings at on Lansdowne. Yeah. Called me up and said, would you be willing to go on social media and get in a fight with somebody you can pick who it is,
No
and
way.
we'll build up a feud with you and them, and then you can bring one wrestler down to the ring. You can manage for a night. We'll get them to manage for a night, and like you'll be in a feud with somebody in the media here, and then the wrestlers will go at it, and we'll put it on television on Impact Wrestling,
That is sick.
which is the coolest thing ever, except
Yeah.
I was on 2-week holiday, and I'd already booked a trip to Florida when they had asked me, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah. See, that's not as because I'm.
And that's my dream. I want to be on television,
Yeah.
being a wrestling manager. I want to be on, and I couldn't do it. So I'm begging them to let me do it when
Yeah.
they come back next year.
That's not as high up as I am on the Impact echelons, but I thanks to Zach. A lot of the stuff on this show is thanks to Zach. I'm on their weekly teleconferences,
Yeah.
their media stuff, and as well, I just actually had the opportunity to interview Eddie Edwards as well as Moose, just to help, just for like a Slammiversary promo
Yep.
thing. Eddie Edwards. Have you seen how much of Eddie Edwards have you actually seen? Because he's
I love watching Eddie Edwards.
yeah, he brings me back to, like, as you said, you were an ECW guy. That match with Tommy Dreamer at Slammiversary
Yeah.
could have easily, like, if you had closed your eyes, well, if there was a way for you to close your eyes and still watch the match, if you know what I mean, that could easily been on a match, like on a card from 90s ECW.
And this is what I love about the way that some groups are coming up now between New Japan and Impact and some of the other groups that are coming along, is that you can be a star and have great matches, and people get to see them, and you don't have to be in WWE. And
Right.
that is something that is a little bit different than what it used to be. I thought you were going to tell me about how great Moose was, and then I was going to walk up and leave. But
Yeah.
however,
Back when before I had started recording the calls, Ross, the head of media, the head of relations,
this
there,
is the guy I was talking about,
Oh,
Ross
yeah,
Foreman.
Yeah. He had called me, and he goes, so it's actually going to be Eddie Edwards first, because it was originally going to be Moose, and then it was going to be Eddie Edwards that I was going to be talking to. But he goes, no, Moose is still talking to somebody else, so here's Eddie Edwards. And I'm like, oh, great, thanks. And he goes, you sound a little excited. Do you not really want to talk to Moose that much? And I'm like, no, I never.
Yeah, it's not that. We all have our favorites.
Yeah.
Moose just isn't one of them.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah. So, mentioned, we're going to be talking some Attitude Era. Now,
Yes.
your favorite angle from the Attitude Era is what?
Wow,
If you had to pick, like,
there's so many, and I'm a little bit biased because, not to toot my own horn, but I've been to a lot of events in that time of the Attitude Era. So I have a few, and I'm sure we'll talk about them because it's hard to pick just one. But saying that the Montreal Screwjob was an angle is incorrect, because it was as legitimate a controversy as the WWE has ever seen. It was Shawn Michaels hating Bret Hart. It was Bret Hart hating Shawn Michaels. And it was Vince McMahon pulling the wool over Bret Hart's eyes and doing that in real life. But
Right.
and I was second row in Montreal when that happened. And it was just at the beginning of the internet too, where to try and find a lot of information was a little bit more difficult. I knew what was happening.
Right.
I saw it develop, but still it all happened so quickly
Right.
that you're like, what's going on? Is this an angle? Because everything, you're always in this mindset of it's an angle. They're trying to do something to make you think something else.
Right.
But when Bret Hart turned around and spit in Vince McMahon's face,
Yeah.
that's not an angle.
Yeah.
He then destroyed all the television sets and printed WCW in the air with his fingers, and
Yeah.
you could tell that this just was not right. But you didn't even fully comprehend it. And I went to Raw in Montreal the next night, and then the very next night was another Raw taping in Cornwall. So subdued. Nothing really happened. You're waiting for all of this stuff to happen as a result, and it just never did, because it was Bret left and everybody was on edge,
Right.
and Shawn Michaels didn't show up, and that was it. It was
Right.
like okay, something really weird has happened. But from all of that, developed the Mr. McMahon heel character, which I'm not a big Vince McMahon on-screen guy.
No.
But it developed one of the greatest characters and really, I think, made Stone Cold Steve Austin what he was. And I think if you go back to the origins of where Mr. McMahon, the on-screen character, was created, it was that night in Montreal.
Right.
And it turned into Steve Austin, who was one of my favorites back when he was in WCW and then ECW. I love Stunning Steve Austin. He was one of my favorites.
Even before, so was the ringmaster too, eh?
And I was destroyed when he came in and didn't talk because I watched him in WCW. He's my favorite guy. He's in ECW cutting the greatest promos ever. Yeah. He gets into WWF at the time, and Ted DiBiase's managing him, and he doesn't say anything? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And then, anyway, so I think from that angle, or from that event that happened in Montreal.
That work shoot is something the Smarks will call it.
It ended up being for Steve Austin and Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
And then everybody joined in. I think it took off for the next 3-4 years and made them a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah, you could argue the same case for The Rock actually as well.
Yep.
Like that really made The Rock. Now I'm assuming you probably know the story behind why that actually happened? Like why Bret Hart was so pissed?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because he didn't want to lose the belt like the day after because he was leaving. He didn't want to lose the belt in Canada.
Right. And he had tried to work out a bunch of different places where he could lose the belt, and he didn't want to leave in the first place. He had signed a contract. He had signed a contract with Vince McMahon that was a 20-year, $20 million deal. It was a $1 million a year for 20 years. And then Vince went to him and said, I'm going to have to break the contract. I can't pay you. You should go and talk to WCW, where he was looking out for the best interest. And Bret didn't want to leave, and he didn't want to leave. And then it ended up where he talked to WCW, and they gave him $3 million a year for 3 years. And so he finally said, okay, but I'm not losing the belt to Shawn in Canada. Now, I think there is a little bit of back and forth. Bret didn't want to lose the belt to Shawn, period. And he was willing to give it up to anybody else. And he was putting up more of an argument than some people think about giving up the belt at that time to Shawn Michaels because he didn't like him. And he didn't think that he was a good representation. And Shawn was Shawn at that time. And he was partying and he was on drugs and he was doing a lot of things. So he didn't want to lose it to him. And he especially didn't want to lose it to him in Canada. And it ended up being one of the, I still think the biggest night of controversy the WWF has ever seen.
Right. Now, sort of as a little bit of a segue, there's another night of controversy known as the Curtain Call back in MSG. Mm-hmm. And of course, two of the four of those guys, known as the Clique, were also the catalysts in in the biggest angle in WCW history. Those of you who don't know what we're talking about, go back and learn your history, please, because if you don't know what the biggest angle in WCW history is, you should.
Was it June or July? I think it was July 1996.
It was.
Bash at the Beach. And I remember being...
Was it?
Oh, yeah, it was.
For the...
100%.
Back when they had all showed up? Oh, back when Hulk Hogan was the...
When Hulk Hogan...
Right.
And that's what I mean. Pardon me, I know that Nash and Hall went there before, but they were there and they were kind of hinting, and they were the outsiders, and what were they doing on WCW television when they worked for WWE when they really didn't, but they were pretending. But I remember I worked at a camp as a camp counselor, kind of in the woods, and this is how old I am, so I'm only going to say this once. There was one phone at the camp, and it was a rotary phone that the camp counselors, if they wanted to call their families or call their girlfriends or boyfriends or anything else, all had to use the same phone, and they had to share it for a couple of hours every night. Okay. And one of my friends called, and somebody took a message for me. So, your buddy John called. So it was fairly important, and I knew that it was that night, and he called, to tell me that Hogan turned and they formed the NWO.
No
and
way.
That's why he called me. And he then sent me the VHS tape of it in the mail. So I could.
Because you were there all summer.
Because I was there all summer. So I could watch the turn of Hogan and the NWO being created on that on that night. So that was I mean, who couldn't get caught up in it when it was going on at the time? And they had tried some different things. They brought Luger in '95 on their first Nitro ever at the Mall. They had done some different things. They had brought these guys in, Nash and Hall, and it was a big deal. But it, they powerbombed Eric Bischoff through the table at the pay-per-view before that, and you thought, okay, where is this going to go? But when Hogan turned, it was one of the biggest deals ever. I mean, the garbage coming in the ring, and at that moment, you knew that something had really taken off. It had really changed when the biggest star in the history of pro wrestling had turned heel. He was a heel way, way before, but when he won the title in '84 from the Iron Sheik, he hadn't been heel in 11 years, 12 years, from '84 to '96. And when he turned, you thought, wow, this is going to be a big deal, because you understood, too, that Hogan made so much money as a face selling the T-shirts and everything else. Even in the 90s, when he came into WCW, he made so much money. If he turned and went bad and turned heel, he would be doing it to make money too. And how is he going to make money? That's what intrigued me the most.
Right. Now, I started noticing, because as we were talking before, I recently have gotten access to the online part of the WWE Network, and that's allowed me to watch old episodes of Monday Nitro. Yeah. And I noticed from the first episode of Monday Nitro that they were about to do something very special with Hulk Hogan. Because I don't know, I'm assuming you're pretty familiar with WCW's, the early Nitro stuff, right?
Yeah, of course.
So back at, I believe it was, I can't remember if it was either Halloween Havoc or Fall Brawl of 1995, there was this sumo monster truck match between the Giant and Hulk Hogan.
Which see, this is what I like to do with you. Right. I like to wait till you bring up stories and say, oh, yeah, I was there.
Were you there for that?
It was in Detroit in 1995, and it was Halloween Havoc.
It was Halloween Havoc, okay.
95, yeah, it was in Detroit. I was there.
Right, so there was that.
It was terrible, by the way, in person.
Yeah. I watched the pay-per-view because I'm going back and I'm watching it in order as it was, starting with the first episode of Nitro and then going into Halloween Havoc. Mm-hmm. There was, again, for those of you who don't know, there was a monster truck sumo match that shouldn't have been a thing, and then after that, they transitioned into the ring, where there was a huge screw job. There was people interfering everywhere. Yeah. The Giant, who you may know now as the Big Show, says that he won the belt, right? Even though that he never really did win the belt.
Oh, it was just
and then
terrible.
It was the next week after on Nitro that Jimmy Hart had come out and. It actually, first of all, Jimmy Hart had turned towards the Giant instead of Hulk Hogan. Mm-hmm. And Jimmy Hart had brought out the contract saying that it was legally binding, that he had signed, that he had the power of attorney, yada, yada, yada. That if Hulk Hogan was disqualified, he would lose the championship to the Giant. Right. Now, they brought out a lawyer. The lawyer said, well, yes, that is true. Due to the nefarious nature of the interference, Hulk Hogan still technically is champion. Now, of course, this prompted Jimmy Hart, the Giant, and the Taskmaster, Kevin Sullivan, to lose it completely. And then it was announced by then WCW President Nick Bockwinkel that the WCW Championship would be defended in the 3-ring, 60-man Battle Royal. I see your face that you're not a huge fan of it.
Well, look, I grew up in Toronto, and I drove from Toronto to Detroit, which was about 4.5 hours each way. So it'd be like driving from here to Toronto. To watch a match that ended up on the roof and that you didn't even really know what happened, and the monster trucks and back in the ring and lawyers and and a 60-man battle royal.
3 rings.
I'm going to tell you, I've put up with a lot of entertainment that they've classified as entertainment. It was as bad as it gets. Like, that's where I was really intrigued with WCW, because Nitro came on the scene and you're excited. Okay, there's some competition. Raw, Nitro, which one am I going to watch? I got to watch both. I got to tape one. I got to figure out how I'm going to watch both each and every week. And when Nitro started, you wanted to get behind it. And then they're pulling angles like this. It was terrible.
Right.
And they figured it out with Hall and Nash coming over. But before that, oh my God, was it bad. You could tell me whether it was at the Joe or whether it was at Cobo Arena. I can't remember. I feel like it was at Cobo.
The World War III? Or like the
Halloween Havoc.
Halloween Havoc. I'll check that out. I was just
in 95.
I was just in the process of signing in to the WWE Network because I figured, because we've got this great TV here. Let's go back.
It is a nice TV.
Yeah.
That.
Let's go back and watch that amazing piece of wrestling history that you were talking about. Or something. We can watch something, because I figure. Actually, no, I've got a better idea of what we could watch. Halloween Havoc, 1990.
What was it? 95.
Joe Louis.
It was at Joe Louis Arena. Yeah, it was in Detroit.
Yeah.
And that was in 95, and I was such a Hogan hater because I was a Ric Flair guy.
Okay.
All the time. Like, I hated Hogan.
So were you a Ric Flair, but like Ric Flair guy back all the way to like Starrcade 83?
Yeah. Like, when I first started watching wrestling, I was a Flair guy.
Okay.
And I hated Hogan. I hated Hogan when at all the WrestleManias. And
so you hated Hogan back when he was Say Your Prayers, Eat Your Vitamins, all that.
I wanted Andre to win at WrestleMania 3. I wanted, like, Hogan, when Hogan didn't participate WrestleMania 4, it was great because Savage won the title. And of course, Hogan had to be the star anyway, even though he wasn't wrestling. And then I thought one of the worst things they did that could have been great that they never made great. They've screwed up a lot of things with Hogan, because the two things I think they could have done the best with him in his entire career was the feud with Macho Man Randy Savage, which they screwed up royally. Yep. And then even worse, when Ric Flair came in the early 90s and they never even wrestled. Like, they wrestled at house shows. They never put them on pay-per-view. Hogan and Flair in the early 90s.
Right.
It's like being handed the keys to the car and going and, you know what, I'm going to take the bus.
Yeah, exactly.
Today.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find, there's a specific, I think it might be this one here. No, okay. When I say the words, I can't remember what day it was, but when I say the words, a finger poke of doom, what comes to mind for you? January 4th, 1999.
I was going to say the changing of the title with Kevin Nash and Hulk Hogan.
Right. Now,
the finger poke of doom.
Right. Now, in my opinion here, this was one of the last, it wasn't the final nail in the coffin, but it sure as hell was one of the last ones.
Right.
One of the last on-screen decisions, because I was, do you listen to 83 Weeks, the Eric Bischoff podcast?
I do.
You do?
Which is hard because I want to believe everything he says.
But
and then as soon as I watch it and go, oh my God, that's so, and then you read a bunch of stuff that, oh, well, this isn't true, and this isn't true. I'm like, okay. So now I've just.
Yeah. I read the book that he likes to trash so badly. Now, Brian Alvarez is a good, he's good. Eric Bischoff did make some good points there, in which that apparently he never did anything, but also apparently Eric Bischoff never offered Bret Hart a contract. or something along those lines, or whatever. But maybe just while I get the headsets all set up here, because we can't listen to stuff through the TV and watch. While I get the headsets set up here, why don't you just talk a little bit more about sort of the 1999 NWO, sort of what's going on at this point in time?
Well, I think in 99, by the time it got there, first of all, it was completely wrecked with the NWO. You had the NWO and the Wolfpack and guys branching off, and I'm watching Virgil and Stevie Ray and Buff Bagwell, and these guys represent the NWO, and it's just shambles of what it used to be. And, you know, I think at the time it got out of hand because they ran, and I want to say the pay-per-view was in 98, but they ran the first, it could have been 97 even, the Sold Out, which was the first NWO pay-per-view. And they legitimately ran a pay-per-view where the NWO won every match. And you're like, what is happening? Why am I watching this? They're telling me of what's going to happen.
Right.
And it was so bad, and it got so filtered down, and then the branches off, and because people knew that the only way that they were going to make money was to get on that. And they kept letting more and more and more people into it. And it just got so bad. And then I just remember one of the biggest mistakes they ever made, which I think is still one of, when I go back and look at crowd reactions to matches.
Right.
And think about when people come out and it's a surprise that they're there, and like the genuine reaction of people, I would put on my top 3 that I've ever seen was Goldberg winning the title against Hogan at the Georgia Dome.
Right.
In front of more than 40,000 people.
Right.
And they put that on for free and announced the match on Thursday on Thunder and had a pay-per-view on the Sunday and then put it on for free on Monday.
Yeah.
Like, if you tried to screw it up, you couldn't screw it up that badly.
Yeah, so I'm just going to set it up here. We'll get the headsets going. I'll just make sure I can hear everything, which I can, which is a good sign. And I think this will actually just be uploaded as a bonus podcast type thing.
Very good.
Because of licensing stuff, can't exactly play stuff that's on the WWE network over the air on CKDJ. Finish, where is it here? Here we go. So, we've been talking how tough just in the match before here, we've got, looks like DDP.
Is that Bryan Adams?
I think so, actually.
Oh, see, this is what I mean. This is NWO at its worst.
Yeah.
Virgil helping Bryan Adams, who used to be Crush. And the worst diamond cutter you've ever seen from Diamond Dallas Page puts a 300-pounder away.
Now, is this diamond cutter here worse than that diamond cutter that Heath Slater caught back when Heath Slater was running those angles leading up to the 1000th episode of Raw, where he was facing all those legends?
It's a good point.
Like,
I give DDP a lot of credit, though, because he was
trying very hard.
And he got into wrestling because he was the neighbor of Eric Bischoff.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah. And that Eric Bischoff worked back in the AWA as an announcer for Vern Gagne, which I used to watch when I was growing up, too.
My dad would tell me all the stories about the AWA.
And Diamond Dallas Page was a manager. Eric Bischoff brought him in, and he was a manager. And he was really good.
Who was he managing at that point?
Bad Company.
Oh, really?
Which was Pat Tanaka and Paul Diamond.
Right.
And they were the tag team champions for a while. Mm-hmm. And he'd bring out his diamond dolls with them.
Yep.
And they would be the coolest people ever. And he also managed Colonel De Beers, if you remember that name.
I've heard the name.
It was like they needed a an anti-war guy to go up against
Okay.
Sergeant Slaughter.
Okay.
And so they brought in the heel war guy, and that was Colonel De Beers. He was from South Africa. He was
All right. Oh, we see. Now this is the most infamous angle. This is the most infamous episode of Nitro. Where we see Goldberg in the police station, which was later revealed to be right across the street
right.
from the arena.
Can you believe that?
And apparently, if he made it in time, he would have been facing Kevin Nash for the championship.
Right. Because these two guys that are about 150 pounds soaking wet
Right. Now, for those...
are containing Goldberg
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah. Now, these were real cops. Because Bill Goldberg knew these guys. Because he was born in Atlanta.
Yeah.
He lived in Atlanta. Now, for those of you guys... I'll just pause this before we watch the match here. Michael Buffer. For any big WCW show, they had to bring Michael Buffer in, and they were paying him a lot of money. Like, I think they said that they paid him like $5,000 just for this one episode of Nitro,
Yeah.
or something. A little bit of backstory if you guys don't have the WWE Network. So on this episode of Nitro, there was it finally came to a point where Macho Man or Hulk that was with Miss Elizabeth right now, or was it which manager was it? Because I can't remember to save my life.
That
right
was
now.
with Hogan?
Yeah, Sherry, right? No. Somebody was stalking somebody.
No, Elizabeth was with the NWO, but she really wasn't with Hogan, only for a brief time when they did the Leno stuff.
So it was Miss Elizabeth though.
Yeah.
So she had accused Goldberg of stalking her, which he really sort of was, in a way. It got to the point where at the beginning of this episode of Nitro here, the police officers came and arrested Goldberg and brought him in. But after being accused, or after being threatened with perjury, Miss Elizabeth basically said, the jig is up. Nothing really ever happened.
Right.
Goldberg, of course, it was just let known that he was going to be released, and if he can make it to the arena in time, that he would be challenging Kevin Nash for the championship.
If he could make it to
If
the
he can
arena
make it in
on
time. So what we're saying is, if he had time, hypothetically, to walk maybe about 30 feet from the front door of the police station to the front door of the Georgia Dome.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Georgia Dome. Home of
Of course, we're getting the welcome to the Georgia Dome at 2 hours and 10 minutes into the episode of Nitro.
Home of the Atlanta Falcons. Thank you, Michael. We know they play there. The cheap pops they used to get.
Yeah.
Main event of 1999. Right here in this ring, the ultimate grudge match.
The one thing I will say, he is so much better than his brother, Michael.
Oh, 100%. Bruce Buffer? It's not good at all.
The following. No. Like,
Yeah.
like the octave jumps in his voice when he's doing the announcing is absolutely is ridiculous.
Pretty cool this year when they brought Buffer in, though, to do the Vegas
Yeah.
Golden Knights first home game of the Stanley Cup Final.
It was Michael, right?
Yep.
Okay, good. Could you imagine Bruce Buffer announcing a hockey game?
40,000 in attendance.
And the millions watching around the world. Oh, it brings back a lot of memories.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Look at that, Tony.
What's a WCW show without fireworks?
What a night it's been. What an exciting, electrifying, but in many ways.
To this day, the NWO theme still remains in my top 3 favorite themes.
Oh, it's iconic. Because you can... The
Sonata-
difference is you can play that theme and people that didn't watch a lot of wrestling know it.
Right.
And that's how you know.
Yeah. Well, the two show I find now even like back in the late 90s, if you were to wear an MWO T-shirt, you'd be recognized. I feel like nowadays the Bullet Club T-shirt is sort of the same thing. Really.
Is it bad that I have a
Bullet Club T-shirt?
I have a Kenny Omega Bullet Club?
I have two. It's fine. I have two
Okay.
different. I have the Villain Club T-shirt.
Yeah.
And then I have the Cease and Desist Too Sweet
Yeah.
shirt with the Young Bucks, where the click symbol is where the click hand sign is blurred out.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit hesitant to buy that shirt while I was there. It was actually right after I had been with Graham a couple weeks, like back a month ago, back when I was in the control room for his noon show.
Right.
I had went to the Hot Topic at Rito,
Yeah.
and I had bought the shirts, and I was a little hesitant to buy the Young Bucks shirt because I thought they were flipping them off, and I didn't know if my mom was gonna.
Yeah, exactly.
But-
Now, I was in Florida, and I was in the mall, and I bought the Kenny Omega shirt, and I bought a couple other shirts, and I was on vacation, and I went up to, I was at Wilmington, North Carolina, and I went to the beach, and I walked onto the beach, and the first guy I saw had a Young Bucks shirt on,
Yeah.
and he like too sweeted me, and I was like, okay, that's. And
Yeah.
then I came up here and realized they were selling the Hot Topic, and I didn't need to buy it in Florida.
Yeah, no, like there. Back when I was out at Holland, like I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, there was a guy wearing a Bullet Club T-shirt. He was ahead of me. I had seen the black, and I had seen the, you know how some of them have the NJPW logo on the
Yep.
back, like right at the back. I had seen it, but I didn't want to say anything just in case, because I was wearing the Marty Skrull shirt,
Right.
and I didn't want to say anything. I wanted to wait to see him turn around. It turns out he was my age, and I have his number.
There you go. There's a little bit of,
We're good friends now.
as Kevin Nash is coming out here with the world title, he pointed with his finger for a long time at both of them. And there's some rich irony.
Of course, here is the bad guy. What's your favorite Scott Hall character? Are you more of a Scott Hall guy or a Razor Ramon?
I think I'm more of a Scott Hall guy when he first got there. I think they...
When he first got to NWO,
Yeah.
or when he first got to WCW.
Yeah, they lost their way. All of them did. But I think the theme music for Razor Ramon is iconic.
Yeah.
Other than the ladder match with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania, I don't remember one thing that he ever actually did. Like, he won Intercontinental titles and had bad matches. He came out with the theme. He tossed the toothpick around, and I don't remember anything else he did. And it's like, I remember the theme. I love the theme.
The theme is the theme is great.
But his first year in WCW as the Outsiders and as a real, true badass.
Yeah. Now this is just because I've been watching a lot of New Japan. I've been watching the G1.
Yeah.
Like
Which is incredible.
The G1 is so good. Just watching this now and seeing Hall and Nash come out, it's almost reminding me a little bit of the Gorillas of Destiny or the Bullet Club Firing Squad or whatever.
Yeah, a
with
little bit.
the Tongas, the Tamatonga and Tongaloa. Now Scott Steiner, of course, still wrestling surprisingly in Impact.
Yeah, unsurprisingly.
Well,
Because he's about the paycheck. And
of course, we've had his brother Rick on the show for an interview back.
how was that?
I wasn't there. That was back before I even knew the show was a thing. This was back when Zach had
Right.
actually just taken over.
I'd imagine not very good. Sorry, Rick.
It was actually. I've heard stories. He could tell stories, but oh my god, it's a hilarious interview to listen to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So far, the biggest interview that I've had was Ken Shamrock
Yeah, well, I interviewed Ken Shamrock when he was here
for Yuck Yucks.
a couple of weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah,
a few weeks ago.
that's what I was interviewing him
Yeah,
too for.
and he was great. He was really good.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of them. They've come in for the Yuck Yucks thing.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Mick Foley was great.
Mick Foley was actually the interview for the first ever episode of the show, back when Will Macklin was the host.
Yeah. He's coming again in September,
Yeah.
Mick Foley. This actually makes me sick. They finally have gotten to the ring here. And
Yeah.
they're pretending and they're going to do this finger poke of doom.
Hogan's in his street clothes to wrestle. That pisses me off. Big deal he's in his street clothes to wrestle. Half the wrestlers nowadays are in their street clothes when they wrestle anyways.
Could you imagine, as you said, this is also at the Georgia Dome.
Yeah.
Like
40,000 people.
Right, and they had Hogan Goldberg in one of the biggest moments in WCW history, and that they thought that this was a good idea. Somebody,
Well, this is what happens when you let Kevin Nash book your own stuff.
Well, and that's why I disliked him a lot. I
Kevin
think he was
Nash?
smart guy.
He was the worst WWF champion ever.
Yeah.
Ever. And that is saying something. If you can be known, like, because more than, like, a lot of people will argue that he's the worst champion ever. Oh, my Lord. 1, 2. If this isn't the biggest suck it to Vince, I don't know what is.
Right. But Kevin Nash being happy that he just lost a world title in front of 40,000 people because it was a ruse. Hey, Kevin.
The title.
You're not the smartest guy in the room. You never were.
Never were. Never will.
And that's the problem, right? Is that all these guys got so much power that they never.
Yeah.
It just ran out of control.
Yeah.
And it actually felt bad because I think the NWO angle, when they were coming in and beating everybody up, and people remember throwing Rey Mysterio into the side of the trailer.
Right.
And like that was badass. That was cool to watch. But at some point, and here's where the NWO lost people. And I'm a big heel guy. I love the heels, right?
Right.
I always love the heels.
I'm a heel guy too.
But
I will.
They let the heels win every single week and just destroy people. And when you don't have a face that can, or a bunch of faces that can come in and compete and beat them and have an actual rivalry, no one's going to watch.
Right.
And they lost themselves along the way with all these guys just winning all of the time.
Right. Now, you guys might hear some audio that just happened. ECW's reboot back in the WWE was arguably one of the worst reboots in wrestling history.
Yes.
Arguably,
because
I would argue that the ECW reboot in WWE was worse than the reboot of the Hollywood Blondes. I would argue that it was worse than any reboot of any tag team.
Really? Well, I guess a whole group as opposed to a tag team, but the reboot of the
new Hollywood Blondes.
Right.
Like, not the ones like, okay, so there
Not
were the Hollywood Blondes that were not the Pillman.
Not Pillman in Austin.
The one after that.
Right. Which was terrible.
Exactly. This was worse than that.
Okay, that's saying a lot.
Right. Now, but as we're about to see in this match that we're about to watch here, I feel like after we watch this match, I feel like you'll understand my viewpoint here. So, you mentioned you were a November to Remember guy. You had seen the November to Remember from the late 90s.
Yeah. I have been to 2 of the November to Remember pay-per-views live.
Right.
One in Buffalo, one in Pittsburgh.
Now, did they have the December to Dismember ones back then as well?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. So, a little bit of history here. Back when Vince decided to bring back ECW, back when it was WWE, back when Vince decided to bring back ECW, they brought back pay-per-views, and I believe it was 2005? Was it 2005 or 2006?
Yeah, around there. I think it was 5.
December to Dismember 2006 is widely argued to be the worst pay-per-view in WWE, WWF history. Now, the only match, because I've watched this entire pay-per-view for the hell of it, just to laugh, maybe 3 or 4 times since I've gotten the network.
Go back and watch the sold outs. I know that was WCW.
Oh, I haven't. I haven't made it. I haven't
made
made it to that point yet. But I'm gonna.
Are like you can't get through it. If you get through it, you're a better person than I am.
Yeah. No, because I'm trying really hard to actually watch chronologically.
Right.
Like I went on the. Have you seen the Squared Circle Reddit?
Yep.
They have a list of everything that's on the network in chronological order.
Right.
So I printed off the WCW one, and I've made it to. I'm going to be watching World War III probably when you leave today.
Which World War III?
60-man, 3-ring.
Oh, the 60-man.
Yeah, so 95. World War III 95.
Right. Trying to think which. I have I'm sitting on a seat here, one of those fold-up chairs with the padding. World War III in Toronto was at the Air Canada Centre in 99.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, was there for that one too.
I will forever be jealous of
of how many stupid events I went to.
not necessarily stupid events, but just pay-per-views.
That one was with Chris Benoit.
Yeah.
And he won the title. But can I tell you, before we just go into this, and maybe we'll go into it a little further.
Yeah.
There has been no better time as a wrestling fan, if you have the opportunity to watch ECW TV from 95 and 96 and just watch all of the episodes
Of the TV shows.
of the TV shows, and some of the people that came in and some of the angles. They used to tape the interviews, and at Tommy Dreamer's house in upstate New York, not upstate, but outside of New York City. They used to go into his basement and tape all of the interviews. It was the greatest wrestling collection I've ever seen, because on the shows and on when they had their events, they had everything. They had the violence, which people loved, but they also had legit wrestling where they had at one time, for wrestling events at one time, they had Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko and Eddie Guerrero
And
Rey Mysterio and Psychosis and some of the greatest wrestlers to have ever wrestled. They used to wrestle best 2 out of 3, like Dean Malenko against Eddie Guerrero and things like that. And then they had the violence, and then they had the great angles on top where Sabu and Taz and some of these guys
where they were where they would feud, but they never wrestled.
Right. And Tommy Dreamer, who could never beat Raven ever, ever, ever. And they had the Public Enemy and the Dudley Boys and the Pitbulls, and they had the tag team division, and they had the singles wrestlers, and they had the violence, and they had the top angles and the cruiserweights. It was a complete wrestling show, like something for everybody. And the TV shows and the promos are some of the greatest that still I've ever seen. So 95, 96 ECW. And I know as we're going to get into the reboot, and you could never duplicate that. Right. And the fact that they tried a couple of times.
Yep.
And this obviously is going to be one of the times that it didn't go so well.
A little bit of a fun trivia question here for you. Who was the final WWE ECW champion?
Wow. The final
reboot champion.
Is it CM Punk?
No. Not even close.
Not even close.
Not even close.
Who was it?
Ezekiel Jackson.
I'm really glad I didn't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Because I've erased all of Ezekiel Jackson's matches from my memory, which is good.
Yeah.
He was terrible.
But you remember who he is now.
Oh, yeah.
Back when he had the whole thing with Yoshitatsu.
Oh, dreadful.
Yeah. All right. Let's go. Now we see Paul Heyman being escorted to the ring. Heyman sold... That almost looks... Wait, hold on a second. Hold on.
Heyman sold out.
No, but I recognize that face, though. That almost looks like... Baron Corbin.
Okay, rewind it.
I think that...
Constable Corbin.
Constable. Stephanie McMahon's personally appoints the Constable of Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, I still watch. Yeah, a little bit. A very young
Baron Corbin.
Baron Corbin.
Almost like... I think it was actually at this... It was either at this show or... are you familiar with NXT right now at all?
Yeah.
Lars Sullivan, right?
Yeah.
So it was either this one or the 2005. No, it was One Night Stand 2005. There was a Twitter thing that was put out. There was a tweet that was put out by somebody that had said Dylan Miley in 2005 had wrote a letter to somebody. You've seen it?
Yeah. Where
his girlfriend dumped him because he went to ECW One Night Stand 2005 instead of hanging out with her on her birthday.
Yeah. Good move, Lars. You've made it.
Yeah.
At least a little bit. And I was reading an article with Braun Strowman about how they're bringing Lars Sullivan up to him, saying he reminds us of you and that he's watched him a little bit.
That will be so good. Yeah. Are you? How much? You'll probably do know this. Indie stuff is. How much indie stuff are you familiar with as well?
Some.
So have you heard of Walter?
No.
The Austrian guy?
No.
No. Okay. So there's this big. I'll show you one of his. I'll show a picture of him to you after this. He I'm assuming you've probably heard of PCO.
Of course, yeah.
PCO. There was a match that he had with Walter. They're probably one of the biggest indie feuds right now. PCO and Walter. They had a match at Joey Janela's Spring Break 2 back in April. It was during WrestleMania weekend. It was the highlight of that show. And considering this is a podcast, I can actually, I don't swear much, but there was a match on this card, okay? On this Joey Janela Spring Break 2 that was called the Clusterfuck.
Okay.
And what it was a 30-man Royal Rumble, sort of, in which there were one person started, no timing and no timed intervals in between. Whoever wanted to come out could go out. The Invisible Man was a legitimate entrant in this.
That's funny.
If you want to, we're talking shitty wrestling here.
That's funny.
Joey Janela's Spring Break 2.
Still the greatest promo man in the business. When he gets out there,
promo non-wrestler.
Yeah, when he gets out there, people pay attention.
Yeah.
And they always have to him when he speaks.
Right.
And
Doesn't matter who
I've
he's
been,
with.
again, from the radio background, you appreciate the fact when somebody comes in and commands a room.
Mm-hmm.
He has commanded a room for a very long time.
25, 30 years.
Yeah, like he
Well,
broke
not that
in.
long. How long has he been?
Well, he was in WCW as an announcer, like an interviewer in the late 80s.
So back when it wasn't back when it was still NWA. Then
It just turned to WCW.
because that's when.
89.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because that's when Jim Crockett took over.
Yeah, 89. So
That was some
you're
good.
talking
wrestling.
30 years.
That was some really good wrestling back then. Because that's back when I think that's they had the yacht signing for the championship match between Luger and Flair.
Yeah.
Homicidal, genocidal, death-defying Sabu within the chamber. But let's all be honest.
I wonder
with
if this
each
mic
other.
works.
The day of Sabu and
okay.
the Sandman and Rob.
That's what you can do on podcasts, right?
Yeah.
To an end.
So you may recognize the structure. This is going to be an Extreme Elimination Chamber match
Let's fast forward to 2006.
for the ECW Championship.
Or not, this is the age of the global phenomenon of ECW, led by your world
Yeah, it
champion,
never made it. And when they tried,
500-pound Big Show.
that's the issue. I mean, the whole issue is even when they bought WCW in 2001 and tried to pretend there was a WCW and a WWE.
Well, you know what the
in-
plan was originally, right? Was
Right.
to have Nitro be
Yeah.
still there, and they'd still have whoever wanted to come over. Because I would say like the biggest name that was coming over was probably that actually stayed with WWF. Shane Douglas,
Yeah.
maybe, because Jeff Jarrett was fired like a week after, and then of course the rest is history. As he went on to
The Elimination Chamber. See, something good came of.
yeah.
Not that the Elimination Chamber is incredible, but at least it's still used today.
Well, I mean, it's
It's not one of my favorite matches.
the elimination. No, my favorite. What would you say your favorite match is?
Like of the gimmick ones?
Yeah.
Boy, it's a really good question because the Royal Rumble I used to think was it just because they would, a couple of people be surprises. But now I'm used to the surprises. Like, you can't surprise me anymore.
And
the
especially
Royal
now that
Rumble,
the internet is so accessible, you can basically see.
And it's a terrible actual match. Like, as soon as the person comes in and does something for 10 seconds, you're waiting for a minute 50 to wait who the next guy is. And that's not how I want to watch a match. I guess I'd say Money in the Bank because there's still some surprises as to who's going to win it. Oh, except for this year. when they gave it to a guy who could win the world title at any time anyway, which is just ridiculous.
But yeah. Do you listen to Fightful's stuff as well at all?
No.
Fightful.com. They're pretty good. I talked about them quite a bit on the show. There was a thing that Sean Ross Sapp had said about Braun Strowman before Money in the Bank as a preview thing, and it had actually happened now where they've got the Monster in the Bank thing. He had said, how shitty would it be if they came up with something stupid like Monster in the Bank if Braun Strowman wins?
Right.
Which, as we saw,
they did,
it's exactly what they did. And it was just announced yesterday, actually, that Samoa Joe, after a surprise sneak attack, is going to be AJ Styles' opponent at SummerSlam for the WWE Championship.
Which is great, because SummerSlam's actually setting up to be
a decent pay-per-view.
Decent.
Because we're finally going to see, hopefully, Brock Lesnar lose the belt to Roman Reigns.
Well, who do you think? Like, I think he'll... They surprised us before when Lesnar kept it, when everyone thought he was going to lose.
Yeah, but this is like the 5th time that these guys have fought.
Right.
And
so, but what do? Do you put it on Reigns and just let him go?
No. Strowman cashes in right after.
But see, that's the predictable thing. Everybody thinks Strowman's going to do that.
Well,
which is why I think something is going to happen.
But it's not going to be Strowman cashing in.
Right. So I think something's going to happen where they're going to put Kevin Owens into the top part again.
Kevin Owens, of course, has a thorough history here, actually, in Ottawa. He wrestled for C4 when he was Kevin Steen back 2011, 2012, I want to say. And he was... I was watching, because I have the... There's a streaming service called Powerbomb TV that have a lot of the old indie stuff. One of those being C4. That's how I watch the C4 shows when I can't get to them.
Right.
I was watching a C4 show when Kevin Steen was on the card, and I watched Monday Night Raw right after when Kevin Owens came out and cut the promo that he did on Monday, and it was surreal. It was just like, you know, those moments where you know that it's somebody that's up there.
Right.
It's just insane to see that he's come so far.
CM Punk's coming out now, one of my absolute favorites.
Oh, I would say, like, I have favorite wrestlers that I'm emotionally attached to.
Yeah.
And I have favorite wrestlers that I like just because they're really good in ring.
Right.
My favorite wrestler that I'm emotionally attached to would probably be Finlay.
Right.
Because he was in the first match that I can remember watching.
Yep.
CM Punk is easily, modern era, my favorite on the mic.
Yeah.
Probably one of my favorites ever on the mic. In the ring, he's also amazing. Now, with all the rumors of him maybe going back to Ring of Honor, I don't know.
Well, he's got to do something, and he's not going to be
fighting in UFC
fighting
for too
in
much
UFC
longer
anymore, and he's still a big star.
Yeah.
So, and there's also the rumors too that Daniel Bryan isn't going to re-sign.
Well, he did.
He just signed?
He re-signed like a couple of weeks ago for like 3 years.
Oh, I thought that was a fake report.
Maybe.
I'm pretty sure that was
was it a fake report?
Not a real report.
Because it was just as Brock Lesnar had said that it was just at the contract announcement that Brock Lesnar wasn't re-signing.
Right.
It was around the same time.
I believe that he has not officially re-signed yet.
Okay.
So
I'm just imagining Daniel Bryan in New Japan. Could you imagine Daniel Bryan versus Kenny Omega?
Kenny Omega is my favorite guy right now in the world. Like, to watch him, and there's some Canadian bias for sure.
Right.
But because he's from Winnipeg.
Yeah. My 12-year-old brother has started getting into New Japan. Like, I went, because we have Chromecasts on our TVs at the house.
Yeah.
And he was watching Okada Omega when Omega won the title at Dominion. And he goes...
I was going to say, it doesn't matter which Okada Omega.
No,
you can watch any one of them.
Yeah. Okada Omega 4 was the best wrestling match ever, arguably. Like, I mean, Dave Meltzer gave it a 7-star. Now, I mean, my feelings about the star rating system are
Bad, yeah.
But he goes, the Japanese guys must feel really crappy in New Japan because 4 out of the 5 titles are held by white guys.
Yeah,
He goes,
exactly.
Because there's
But you think about over here, and there's a time, right, where Nakamura won the Men's Royal Rumble, Asuka won
the women's
the
Royal
Women's
Rumble,
Royal Rumble,
but
and
failed in her because she lost it to Charlotte at WrestleMania.
Right.
Now that was, I remember saying,
could have been my favorite moment at WrestleMania.
Asuka losing to Charlotte?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember saying, I can't remember to who, but I remember saying to somebody that if they are going to make Asuka lose her streak, Charlotte is the person to do it.
Right.
Because even though she is out with an injury right now, she is the best women's wrestler in the division right now.
Oh, by far.
And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens now that they just announced, I'm going to be talking about this on the radio show.
Yeah.
Now that they just announced Evolution, the women's pay-per-view.
Yeah. Which I think they've set up well because they've set up, the Raw Championship, the SmackDown Championship, the finals of the Mae Young
Classic.
They've set up.
Now there were also rumors that they're going to introduce women's tag titles as well.
Yeah.
Now
I read that they're going to, but it's not going to be in time for the.
It's probably going to be WrestleMania
for
or
the
something
pay-per-view.
Like
Yeah.
Because
they still need some more. And the issue is, right, is you rush all of these people up from NXT.
Oh, here we go. Here's another guy.
One of my absolute least favorites. Like
ever or right now because of what he's been put
no,
through?
ever.
Ever?
Yeah.
Bobby Lashley, of course, is who we're talking about.
Yeah, for a guy that. There's other guys I've really disliked, but when they put guys at the top. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm going to tell you, I'm not a huge. I don't mind Roman Reigns. Everyone hates him. I don't mind him.
Like,
I really don't. Yeah. But you also need somebody else with Roman to make him at the top level. And Bobby Lashley is not that guy. And I just can't even. Like, there's no emotion. There's no genuine. I find him very disingenuous. And I find him cold. You mentioned the emotional attachment that you have to guys. He can't talk. I don't think he can wrestle. And I just have. I was so glad Roman Reigns won last night.
Yeah, my dad had, because my dad stopped watching when I was born, actually, just because he used to watch. He would all the stuff that we're talking about. He used to watch up until when I was born in 2001. He goes, I was watching this a couple nights, maybe like a week ago or so. Oh, do you have to get going soon?
No, I'm just. It's the boss. I only respond to the boss when I'm doing podcasts.
Shit, yeah. Because what time do you have to be there for noon, right?
Yeah, I probably have another 20 minutes.
Okay, cool. How fitting.
Oh.
The match. Can watch a little bit of the match. My dad, when I was watching this, he goes, Bobby Lashley looks like a juiced up Wayne Brady. He does. Yeah. Does he not? Like,
I'll give him credit. We're watching this back in 2006. It's 2018. He looks identical. He looks exactly the same right now.
Yeah.
Than he did.
Well, because he had to stay. He had to stay. Like in shape because he was wrestling in MMA. He was fighting in.
But he doesn't look a day older now than he did 12 years ago.
No.
And the headband, Bobby. Could we get rid of the headband, please?
Yeah. He's not a basketball player. No, Bob Holly or Crush. Shit. Which one is
that's
hardcore?
Bob Holly. That's Bob Holly.
That is Bob Holly?
Yeah.
Okay. He looks older in this. Oh.
Rob Van Dam.
Rob Van Dam.
Loved Rob Van Dam back in the ECW as well.
I remember It was 5 years ago, I can say, or however long ago it was, I can say this. When I was watching not so approved streams of pay-per-views,
Right.
I was in Niagara Falls. I was watching this on whatever I was, and it was 11 o'clock at night. My entire family had gone to sleep, and they had put the first vignette that Rob Van Dam was coming back. I woke my entire family up losing my shit because Rob Van Dam
Is coming back.
Yeah. Or no, it was the Raw. It was the first Raw that they had put the vignette. Because I remember that was the same night that Mark Henry pulled his fake retirement.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll skip ahead a little bit here, just so we can, because it doesn't really, like, it's slow for the first half of it, so we'll just
Yeah.
skip to,
Elimination chambers are usually like that.
and like the first 12 minutes, like the last 12 minutes rather, are where the real meat of everything is, where the real meat of everything is.
Look at this. Look at this.
Andrew Martin test.
Why is Tess jumping off of a pod?
Right.
Why is it freezing right now?
Small miracle that Van Dam's wings aren't splat all over that canvas. And they may be.
All right, now we see 38 seconds till the Big Show.
Who's going to be next? Less than 30 seconds for the next competitor to be.
Oh, Lashley still hasn't come in yet.
I knew that this chamber
Oh, well, you got to skip ahead to when Big Show tries to come in.
Yeah. Oh, that's right, because this is where one of the most famous botches.
Yes. Not as famous as
Well,
Tugboat or
Shockmaster
Shockmaster.
or Jeff Hardy and Jinder Mahal at the Greatest Royal Rumble. Did you see that spot? Mahal Hardy, where Hardy went for the Whisper in the Wind, and Mahal was still standing. Hardy missed, but then Mahal still took the bump and went down.
Oh, I don't know if I saw that.
All right, Lashley's coming in. Yeah, we can skip this.
How much impact Lashley can create from such a short distance from his
Okay, so Big Show still hasn't come in here.
Speaking of explosive, that vertical snap suplex, very explosive. Bear in mind, Lashley has been trapped in a pod. Uh-oh, he's got a crowbar though, Joe. Lashley got the
Is that Joey Styles that's on
Sure
commentary
is.
with Taz? Okay.
Yeah. The voice of ECW back in the day.
Yeah.
With his
Bobby
tagline.
Lashley, 1, 2, 3. All right, Bobby Lashley versus Big Show. Big Show is...
Do you believe this? And one could surmise that this is not the situation Paul Heyman wanted tonight at the December to Dismember. What is?
Doesn't look like it's the one that Big Show wants either.
Big Show is, well, no, it looks getting some words of advice from Heyman. Or pray. Maybe a little bit of both.
Why would the Big Show be scared of anybody?
Oh, wait, look at Lashley here. Look at this.
Like, I'm trying. I know Bobby Lashley's a big guy, but you're the biggest human being on the planet. Why is it that you would be scared of him?
Master manipulator and motivator, at least in his own mind, trying to fire up the Big Show.
Throwing a table.
Bobby Lashley just sending a
He looks like he's about to shit himself. Big Show does.
Yeah.
He's dying for Big Show to get out of that pod, and we're going to see this explosion. in just
Well, we
about
certainly
10
are, Taz.
seconds.
We're going to see this explosion.
What explosion are we about to see, though? That
Not-
is the real question here.
Not the one that people are hoping for.
Come on out, Big Show. Oh, but wait, oh man, I forgot about that. The damn baseball bat. Big Show is not entering the extreme elimination.
Oh, it wasn't.
chamber alone.
Was it this one?
It must not have been.
No.
Because when he fell through the glass.
Yeah, no, that was No Way Out 2008, I think.
But anyway,
think.
ECW
Anyways.
failed miserably. And
It has come down to two
in the
men here tonight.
WWE.
Yep.
Because it was never going to be. And trying to make it something.
Yeah. WWE seemed to really like the barbed wire baseball battles. I think it was at SummerSlam of this same year, 06, that there was the famous I Quit match between Ric Flair and Mick Foley.
Yep. Which Ric Flair did way too many of those things after his career was done. Hardcore matches and bleeding profusely and all of those things.
In your opinion, do you think Evolution should have been a thing? Evolution, of course, being Ric Flair, Triple H, Randy Orton, and Batista.
Oh, it was a great group.
Yeah. Do you think Ric Flair should have been wrestling in that or no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they still had enough to make him be okay and protected with those guys. But I love the idea of that group. I don't think it came, like most groups, they don't stay around long enough to, have longevity like the Four Horsemen back in the day and some of the other great groups.
Right.
But I love the idea of that group.
Of Evolution. Like it was the past, present, future kind of thing that WWE is pushing ever so hard now. And I think that's something that, like, if they were to reboot a faction, Evolution would be the best way to, like, Evolution would probably be the best one to do.
Yeah.
Especially now that they're pushing maybe like a women's, no pun intended, but Evolution group.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Because it wasn't so...
Right.
Like, in the history of wrestling, like some of the other groups, like the Four Horsemen.
Big Show's going for the choke slam here.
Don't try and duplicate the Four Horsemen because it ain't going to happen. Like, no matter what you're going to do, it's not going to happen. Right. Don't try and duplicate the NWO. It's not going to happen. But Evolution, you can do if you did it right. And people would say, oh, that was a cool group before, but yeah, you're doing a good job with it now.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the Horsemen, too. They were like Flair and the Horsemen in the 80s were...
In your opinion, who's the most underrated member
of the Horsemen?
Yeah.
I was a huge Arn Anderson fan.
Yeah.
And so...
That sequence right there was probably what's going on right now in ring is probably, you can hear Heyman screaming in the background there.
Isn't that most of the crowd?
Lashley with a spear to Big Show. 1, 2, 3.
At least it's over.
Yeah.
That's the good part.
Yeah. At least it's over.
But, yeah, I think you go back, and for me, I look at some of the things in wrestling that have kept me going, and it's the groups, it's the promos, it's the way that people continue to, like, the great characters. So, like, right now, I've always loved the true wrestler, and then I love the characters. So, give me more of AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura and Samoa Joe and those guys that, they can talk, but they can really wrestle. And I love seeing those guys on TV. So when I watch Raw, like I watched Raw last night and I kind of flipped through it like I do. I think 3 hours is too long for them.
SmackDown?
Yeah, I flipped through Raw last night and then SmackDown. Like, I didn't watch Raw on Monday.
Oh, you didn't watch Raw on Monday? Okay.
And so I ended up... I have a hard time watching Raw from beginning to end.
Because, it's the length of a pay-per-view.
Right. That's what I mean. 3 hours, and there's a lot of stuff in the middle where it's like, okay, come on, guys.
Like, that segment a couple of weeks ago, now that you say that, with where they had the 6 guys come out and say why they should be Universal Champion or why they should contend for that.
And how many times have we started a Raw with 2 guys out there and then somebody else wants to join the fray and then somebody else don't leave me out. And like, yeah, we get it. We understand. But when you have it's why I'm excited about SummerSlam, because I think you're going to have AJ Styles and Samoa Joe, which is going to be really good. I think Kevin Owens is going to win the Money in the Bank from Braun Strowman. That's why
that's right, because they announced that for SummerSlam.
That's why I don't think Strowman's going to have a chance to cash in. I think that's going to be the big plan.
Now, do you think there's going to be a stipulation, like a gimmick match for this, or no? Do you think it's just going to be a straight, clean 1, 2, 3 in the?
I think Kevin Owens is going to be the champion at the end of the night
of SummerSlam.
Yeah. I don't think you fall off the top of a cage for the company if the company's not doing something for you.
Right. Now, just before, because I know you got to because you have to record, you have to go on air in just about an hour.
Live.
You're live.
12 o'clock until 3 with Todd White today, yeah.
In the words of, crap, who the hell was it? F it, we'll do it live. We'll do it live. Who was that? Bill O'Reilly? No. Bill Simmons? No. It was Bill O'Reilly, I think.
It was Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah.
Live's always better.
Yeah.
I love doing live radio.
I just lost what I was about to say. There was a question that I was going to ask you. What were we talking about?
Well, just about the
Kevin
different
Owens.
groups and like Kevin Owens, but I think SummerSlam you got Owens versus Strowman, which I think they're going to do something. There's no way Strowman wins clean. There's no way.
No.
Because what's the point? What's the point of doing all this? And again, this is where you have to ask yourself. Kevin Owens fell off the top of a cage, got thrown off the top of a cage.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care how fake people tell you wrestling is, and I know they had an airbag underneath the announce table.
Yeah.
Fine. Like, people don't do that and get up and be okay. When you do things like that for the company, you're not just losing clean on the next pay-per-view.
And Kevin Owens won the match.
Right.
By there. Now, people are comparing Kevin Owens being thrown off the cage by Braun Strowman to Mick Foley and The Undertaker. That, in my honest opinion, that's probably one of the most unfair comparisons you can make. Specifically just for the reason that, like, the Attitude Era, kind of coming full circle here into what we were talking about beginning.
Yeah.
The Attitude Era was where wrestling really meant something.
Right.
And seeing Braun Strowman, after chasing Kevin Owens around for like the past month, throwing the porta potty off the stage, I don't think wrestling, or at least this specific aspect of wrestling, has ever meant less.
I would agree with you. I don't think they've done a very good job at building up their spots, and you're right. I wish it meant more because I'm a huge Kevin Owens fan, and I think that moment should have been career defining for him, where I don't think it was. As you said, it's forgotten. Like the next week, it's like, okay, what else are we doing? And you can't do that to your performers. So that's why I do think in the long run they're going to reward Kevin Owens for that. And
it would be a mistake not to.
It would be. So you make a good point. And the other thing that people forget about the Mick Foley one, it was in Pittsburgh. We just passed the 20-year anniversary of it not long ago.
Of the championship.
Of Mick Foley being thrown off the cage?
Was it? Oh, yeah, that was him being thrown off the cage. That's right. Yeah.
Because I remember I was on the air. I talked about this on TSN 1200 on the day. It was the 20-year anniversary. It was a month or two ago. It was in June, I think. When that happened, and it was so iconic, and he left, and then he came back, and what people forget about that match was that they did another spot that was not supposed to happen, where the cage was not supposed to break, when he chokeslammed him on top of the cage, and the cage broke, and he fell down through the cage to the mat, and for people who don't know, a chair also fell down, and if you watch, he lands on the mat. This is after being thrown off the top of the cage. He lands on the mat through the top of the steel cage, and a chair comes down and hits him right in the teeth, and his tooth goes up through his nose.
Yeah, and this was one of the cases where the fourth wall was broken. Terry Funk actually came out because he had there was an interview that I was listening to after, or a couple weeks ago or whatever it was. Terry Funk legitimately thought that Mick Foley had died.
Right.
And was this? I can't remember. Was this before or after?
Owen Hart?
Yeah.
I knew you were going to say that. See, good minds think alike. This was before. Owen Hart died in 99.
Over the Edge 99, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this was in 98.
Yeah.
So you would think, well, that's the problem, is they didn't learn their lesson because they had a guy take 2 falls that were just crazy. And then obviously it was a unfortunate, terrible accident with Owen Hart. But anyway, this was something that one of the iconic moments, as you said, that defined the Attitude Era.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of those matches. So, you know, it was a fun time. The 90s was, for me, the best time in wrestling, from ECW to the NWO coming in to the real competition between Raw and Nitro, and then the evolution of Vince McMahon's character into Mr. McMahon and Stone Cold, and some of the matches we didn't even talk about, you know, Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin with a double turn and successful.
Yeah.
The fact that you could pull that off successfully it's a great idea. Hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a match, but to do it where you can turn a good guy heel and a bad guy face in the exact same match with both of them getting the reaction, incredible. And they did that at WrestleMania. So there's been, I was a huge Austin fan before he ever got here, and a lot of respect for him as well. So yeah, so many great things that happened from about 90, I'd say 95 ECW. I don't think the other stuff got going until a little bit later, like 96 with the NWO and 97 with some of the Attitude Era in the WWE. But yeah, about 95 to 99, go back and watch the ECW Nitro and Raws and pay-per-views, and that was a time that we'll never get back. We'll never see anything like it again.
For sure. All right. Lee Versage, TSN 1200, host of... Is there a name for your... There is a name for your show, right?
No, there isn't, because I do... Sometimes I do In a Box, sometimes I do The Drive. I do all of the Red Blacks pre- and post-game shows.
Right.
And do most of the Senators. I did about 65.
Are you still doing 67s between the benches?
I'm not anymore, no. But still do Senators, intermissions, and post-game, and I did about 25 to 30 pre-games as well, and they just kind of use me wherever. Also, this year, and I think it's going to go ahead next year too, TSN Weekend that myself, Graham Creech, and Steve Bunda host every Saturday and Sunday morning. So I'm working a lot. I just don't have anything regular. Like this week, I'm doing In the Box today and The Drive tomorrow. So
yeah. All right. Thanks for coming in. We definitely have to do this again at some point. I think this is going to be...
Promise me we will, because I feel like we just dominated the 90s, and there's so much...
We can go further back.
There's so much else to talk about, but we had a good time. I really appreciate you having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. This is... Considering I've only been in radio for about... It's coming on 4 months now.
That's it?
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to be taking
I started... Before March 14th... I never walked into a radio studio.
You're going to be taking my job soon, so don't go too quickly, okay?
All right. Sounds good. All right. Have a good one, man.